All right. I remember in a very extensive conversation that that went on between myself and a friend, a brother, another endeavorer. So we're speaking on the more practical matters of religiosity. I recounted the trip from Africa and clear acknowledgement that the Enlightenment did not reach this part of the globe. There are multiple of them, but this is the one under question. And what is the Enlightenment, and how does it preclude and circumscribe its domain? Salvation, work out your own salvation. The salvation is not promised as grace is. Grace is an undeserved favor. And we're speaking on the practical aspect of religiosity. That the main focus is not concentrating on, this is the sum of that question as well, in other moments that perhaps might not be said under the single breath. But there are multiple ways to go about being a human, and it's not clear which one of these ways are advantageous, or which one of these ways is definitive or marks that is exemplary. So people take on different modes of being. The world takes on different ways of organizing itself. And this relates to the world. This relates to how we ourselves exist in it and what it becomes for us. So if you were to walk and interrogate an innocent pedestrian and question them on their notion of nature, depending on where you find yourself in the globe, depending on standard of living, you get one description that's different from another. This is the differences of appearance that is attributed to the world in its disclosure to the self and the subjective. But objectively, the world's benevolent. It is indifferent. It is yours. The world is yours, and it's what you create of it, how you transform it, what you make of it, that makes what it is for you. So when we're speaking on this practical aspect of religiosity, the focus was the agenda needs to leave the walls of the church. This gathering and fellowship and sermon pattern, it's not operative. It does not work. A new approach is required. And this is the revolutions and the steps, each incremental step that marks a spin, a discovery, a revelatory discovery on any subject comes up in this way of a new strategy is required. There's something wrong with the approach. But in this case, we know it doesn't work because it does not have any impact. There isn't any hold. There needs to be a hold, and the hold needs to be embodied. So it has to be embodied between a network of individuals in a community, in a city, in a town, and eventually permeating as far as that concentric circle goes. So then what do it mean for it to become operative, for it to work? What new system needs to come across? And I believe it's the one of addressing the problem on a humane level, meaning individually, between a person and another person. That's how the solution should be taken, because humans are human first. There is the world, there's the movement from birth to death, and all from as it's trying to interpret it from non-existence into existence, back to non-existence. So there's a ratio of 2-to-1 of this same non-existentive state. But in those states, there is no recollection of it. What is certain here is the felt presence of immediate experience. And this whole needs to be embodied in that agreement. And if it is, and it's reflected, then you get societies playing tricks and doing a circus acts, because they now know how to configure themselves. They're in sync. If they're in sync, they're coming after they're coming after tranquility. That's the central motivation, is tranquility. What is the world? The origin of man, the origin of species, where does it lead teleologically and eschatologically, in eschatology? How does it end? How does it complete in the final analysis? How would you compute it? How would you synthesize it? how will you discuss it? The main focus still being the practicality of religiosity. So we'll continue that line instead of answering those questions that will derail from it. The action, the agenda needs to leave the wall of the church. It has to go where the rubber meets the road. So that's actually getting there. So that's actually getting there in the present, in the felt. So we counted the anecdote of Africa, of this side of the world that the Enlightenment did not reach, and the fact that there is it's as if it's a black hole. It's not letting go of this non-operative, non-effective mode of attending. So call it attention is a moral act. So because of this ineffective way of attending, the world becomes the same intergenerationally. It's in a movement. It's moving parallel to time, but it's not moving parallel to development. It's not increasing in its lane of development. There is equals to its years. It does not output the same amount of productivity, and productivity here is reflected in the distribution of increased standard of living. It's not widespread. It's not centralized. It's not stationed. So how are certain able to configure themselves in this way? And you call them you call them the enlightened, the industrialized, the superpowers. This is still a subsection of the world. So there's that discrepancy to describe. There's that disproportionality to exemplify deficiency on one side, where it isn't reflected in another. But ideas, are distributable. There are these insights or motivation are distributable. But behind this link, it's the infusement of the biblical. Behind this lean is the infusement of the biblical response. How is it addressed? How is it addressed in the? How is it addressed from a biblical background? That's still describing how the world becomes, how the evolution, how the vector of evolution takes hold. There is us now, we who are present in the moment, we hold a special portion of the world, because we're the ones that are present in the moment. Nothing fresh is being said there, but the back of the world, the part of the world that isn't seen, has influenced by the momentum, has influenced by by the wheel they invented during the generation. So each in moments are supposed to be working on something, but the general theme is a trope, rather. The general trope, or the trope, is that it's not repeated in the succeeding generation. If it is, then there's an error in the system. And so that has to be resolved. It has to be adjusted, and things change from it. So also along the line of the practical aspect of religiosity and the agenda leaving the walls of the church, is that it becomes institutionalized. And knowing that this channel is surrounded by the gospel of Eden, the good news of Eden, and all it means for a higher animal like yourself is like authentic actualization and its prerequisite or post-requisite habitat or Anthropocene, and they are both available. That's the good news. All right, you're thrown into being. You had nothing to do with it. Yes, and now the opportunity is given to you, but what do you turn it into? This is the alchemical process, and it only means turning water into wine, lemon into lemonade. This situation of the is of earth ought to be in this place, ought to be in heaven, ought to be in Eden. That is the manifestation of heaven on earth. But what it means is that it's the symbolization of the spirit coming out of the monkey and then inhabit and reviewing, reseeing, rethinking, reconsidering, reevaluating, because the environment doesn't change, but the perception of the environment changes. So that's this transition from heaven to hell is a chemical imbalance. When it changes, that's how epiphanies are knowing that everything is truly the communication or collaboration between molecules and atoms and transferring and bonds and breaking of bonds and reactivity and signals and impulses and electricity, neuroelectricity. So it can be broken down at that level because there is the physical property of man, but along with him is the soul, is this intangible, immaterial, incorporeal, and felt, because it's not made of wetware. It's not made of ware that it can be felt, but it's perceived, it's perceived, it's acknowledged, it's recognized. And what that will mean for man when this state becomes institutionalized, meaning that it gains that status as one. What institutions are, there many times this will happen for a human than it will happen for an institution. Institutions survive longer. They are a way of creating permanence in the world. And we want these things to be permanent. We want our reminders to be permanent. We want our reminders to evolve, our prompt to evolve, our call to action, our call to duty to evolve and become authentically actualized individuals. If the world is made up of authentically actualized individuals, the world's crises are solved. The world's spirit is transformed. It can be tasted, it can be felt. In a similar expert wine aficionado or a gifted chef can taste deficiencies, ingredients that are omitted, ingredients that are overused is more general because we just have our palate are calibrated to these things. But more subtle changes, call them perfect pitches of taste bud configuration, then others are more in this. But this is only isolating it for the fact that it can be recognized at its most subtlest and nuanced and mysterious and enigmatic. And we're taking that and reusing it in how we describe the spirit and the flavoring of the world. That is not what it's potential for. And a newbie can sense this if they ask the right questions. Why is it in darkness? Why are these things that are self-evident? Why are they not normalized, institutionalized, and generalized and normalized? And why are these things not available? And then the answer for that is that man comes from there. He shares his ancestry. Think about the merger between think about the merger from from his amnesia to when he starts to archive his information in an electronic gallery. These are grand transitions, but not focusing on the transition from one point to another, but focusing on the medium. How did it happen? What are the nuts and bolts and details that allowed it to occur in this way? It's instructional. That's why the word can be systematized into human comfort, and by using pleasing architecture and anger and ratios on them, they feel more at ease. So there are multiple ways to intercept or impact man to get him to conform or behave in a localized manner, like he's generally like he generally is, until you're in the realms where these memos did not reach, simply because there isn't the linkage. So the link into modernity, the internet itself, comes with its ability to influence, to infuse. That's why the spirit of the truth, when it reemerges into culture, it uses it as a medium, but also along with it, congregating with it, perpetuating with it, are its antis, its negative, its inverses, which seek the latter. So it's binary at the basis. The world can be created for what it can be, or it can be created suboptimally. And in most times it will be found perceptible changes can be perceived, by individual in their lifetime if they are working in the time periods where multiple events are called upon. So times are really categorized by the events that occur within it. And if you're a product of your time, you're a product of a certain statute, a certain series of events that are occurring, and these events are telling, they are revealing, and they unravel the mystery of non-disclosure, and because we're continuously to impact and further our area, and to continue impacting and furthering our area into the unknown of the world, drawn into being what can one make of it. And in this state of practical religiosity, and us rethinking the agenda of the world, and the fact of converting, changing, and that's our movement. It's down there where it's common. It's down there where the answer is either A, maintain the status quo, or B, ask yourself the question: are you contributing into the evils that being, knowing that you cannot stop the evil that is? Yes, it's clear that no single person can stop the total sum of suffering, but start by deeming turning it off with your capabilities. So if you stop contributing to evil, and I stop, and then more of us pick on this attitude, and we're in a minority group, and we're secluded, we immediately have a more appetizing and cultural flavor. And so thinking of culture as a liquid thing, so having those properties, if you think about it in its closest abstraction as a concrete concept, that it is a fluidity thing in thought, and these things go on as well. So thinking still on the practical aspect or impractical aspect of religiosity, and the fact that the work is to be done outside the walls, it's always the same thing. So you can recombine church and state. They're both up to the same good, but doing it in a wrong way. And really meaning that because they're blind and corrupt, but these are not their doing still, because always to one first, to analytically and backtrack to initial call, or initial essential energy. That is the prime mover that's needed to move. It's the threshold that's needed to move the world, such as in virtue of what it is, to be what it has become. So it is the greatest thing happening at the best possible time. So we just go on in this line of infinite combinatory rearrangement. And so we're moving things and changing them, updating them, and hybridizing them. And it's heterogeneous, and in strings will have homogeneity, but it's trying to draw in a total coalescing system of explanation of all the interaction components and factors and layers of reality and present felt reality on what it is, describing it in its physical sense, with its physical properties, but also its abstract properties, its metaphysical properties rather. In speaking about it in its physical properties, but its metaphysical corresponding properties. Speaking about it in the forms, the actions go on in the forms before they become and reflected into the physical world. The physical world is a reflection of the metaphysical interplay. There is always a form and an arena in the noumenal world, the world where the mind exists when it returns to its initial state. The mind is it. The mind is a subpart. It's a subpart of its metaphysical form, and it serves to function as material. see the congregation, if you imagine them infused, and because you can jot it down here so that it's visually apparent, that there's two ways to think about them, that they're coming into the world and they start here, and this could be the Big Bang. But also you can think about it as them coming into the world here, and this is Adam and Eve. That wherever you want to measure him from, that man is the descendant of the ape, but also related to the divine. But the divine is a content in consciousness by default. The divine is a content in consciousness by default. These are factory installed, that within any sentient being like ourselves, that it's clearly, unless we are unless we misunderstand our storage or our capacity, we're not the product of our own creation. So we have no say into how we came into being, and we acknowledge that charitably and cheerfully. It's an implicit acknowledgement that there is that relationship between what the Big Bang represents. But then we have represented history. This is argument about history that we're unclear about, because we're not outweightness we're not bystander. We don't hold full indisputable evidence of how the world was day after day, starting from prehistory. But we have it in our own personal history. We can recount as far back as our memory allows us to replay episodes of the day. But we do not have that because we weren't available, and that's not how inherited experience works. But we move from non-existence into the tendency for inherited experiences, and then we, in some projected time period, will lose this sensation. But you have never lost anything here. So any way of slicing the pie, really one ends up with it, and they can have it too. In both sense of it is how you utilize your ability to attend. It is a moral action, and if you question it, so then that's the way it's not to question it being convoluted, but that's both ways are just to explain that this is the beginning. There's a question mark here, but we have a starting point. So that's good news. It can be included. It can be used as a placeholder. The fact that you don't have a clear, or you have a lacomachy about verisimilitude, or you have the conflict over terminology, that's regardless of the point. The point is that there is the accomplishment, that you have this starting, you have this starting justification, and then you can start to form and connect the puzzle and connect the dots from there. But honestly, connecting the dot as pure-heartedly one can, and they only end up back where they're respirating and having to deal with familial disputes, and having telephone obligations. So there's always the real world at the back of whoever you are. So the transfiguration of divine into the human flesh, it's in the human flesh. It's under the human condition. The human condition is a big part of the explanatory system, because it institutes its own constitution, and then that's grace, and that's forgivability on the part of the human, because under the human experience and in the human world, it's a different set of factor than what he's immediately called for. So one of his factors is time, that it is time that man gets to God, and in time that he claims his title, that he is the physical remanifestation of his creator, of the creator, of creation. And so now that he's a physical, sentient remanifestation of creation, he takes on the responsibility of it. And mainly the things here, given that he's so wise for the type of thing that he is, he simply recreates the world. He has dominion over it. He can reconfigure the puzzle anyhow he wishes. But how does he do it? What incites him to X and not Y, and Y if not sub 1W52, or some other random combination of characters. And everything that comes to the mind as ideas, as suggestion, is pulled for reasons that is not exactly clear, but always an ending with their work being done. The job gets done in some way that there is unconsciousness continuously playing in how man exerts his agency. There is incompatibility, rational incompatibility. If you were to decipher as far down into the details of each second to second increment, I mean, this is tedious, fruitless task, but it is one that is guaranteed to provide a more potent resolution. Thinking about it as a depiction, it's one treasure to create a more potent resolution of whatever the subject matter is that's being examined, inquired into in those second to second increments. And so that's another way to recognize and honor this fact in the explanatory network. The whole explanation. Well, perhaps that's not the best line to tangent into. That can continue with the human condition being itself revelatory, or it being an absolution, because it also frees him, exonerates him from some of the blame that's attributed to him, and also by himself, his permission to relax and permission that he exercises his self-control is the closest thing he has to a free will. Because man does not have if you don't have self-control, that means that you're meandering, that means that you move by the wind. But if you do have self-control, I mean, you're able to navigate through the waves of impulses. But the waves of impulses are the deterministic factors that create that creates a world that is as if free will, that is presented as free will. So how one moves through this storm of impulses is how much self-control they have. And how much self-control they have is how much autonomy they have. How much autonomy they have is the thing that puts them exactly in the executive position, meaning that they can claim their moment-to-moment or history, meaning that we want a certain history. If you were to go back in time, how much of this moment of your time of your time tabulation, of your preceding time tabulation would you want to alter? If you were to now immediately choose, now that you're at your y-axis, you immediately choose the respective future aspect of your history, then you would choose them in such a way that you wouldn't need to alter them in a future questioning. So that's the insight, that's the principle behind perpetuation. But this is automatic, that is being described in detail here when one is practiced as an authentically actualized individual. They're just the fact of dealing with humans and automatic responses, and not having to bite your tongue or lose it, or any of the other words that the humans use to describe the fact that they have lost that joystick to wield their self. But if you always wield yourself, that means that you're not shifted by the wind. How much the sentence weight is on each mind scale, then it's the amount of impact it installs. So that's world. And then on the practical aspect of religiosity, does it become clearer? Is it a little more understandable what is being discussed throughout the channel? So in the other videos, it will be over time and with quantity, and the quality will be taken care of in dreamland, and it's over that quantity and over that time that one is able to perhaps decipher what is the point of the channels with his from his different axes of understanding. The focus is on authentic actualization, interpretation of the world, and its disclosure in plain terms as it was promised, and that's the reemergence of this spirit of truth into the human world. and it is another player in the story, because man is so much acquainted with his story likeness in his history as well. This is his even with him now having simulacrum, a miniature simulacrum of it in his film industry, but his himself, he is like a film a film series, what he does season to season, time after time, and in repeated succession, because all this goes on. There's discombobulation and bewildering in war and wow, what are some of the really titillating, stimulating, and explosive, imagistically explosive traits of man? Well, these are these things, and with that, one could prompt it in their own imagination. But with all these things, it happens on that rotation and that rotation. So from this view, it's constancy and order. So this is order, but within order is this great mass of effervescent disorder and entropy, and that all system tends towards the lowest energy state. The lowest energy state, when it's reflected cortically, call it in the neocortex, in this newer organ that's greatly and hypertrophized in the Homo sapiens. Because of this, and is the cortical reflection of it is an increased expanded consciousness, where one has a different relationship with the domain, that those who also resonate with the domain can be communicated with in great extent because of this expanded compendium repository and pattern recognition. And pattern recognition, patterns in its fractality is so much about the world. Pattern recognition is implied in the position of man and in his story. Well, then, not to overuse the ability, but perhaps to discontinue the monologue from here.